I'm Belle, I'm events coordinator here at Books Are Magic. We are so excited to be celebrating Spirited Women. Yay! These cocktails are delicious, so I can't wait to hear more about this. If you need to use the restroom at any point, it's right next to these moleskin spinners, like that spinner right there. We are going to be doing a hand-raised audience Q&A at the end of the conversation, so you can start thinking of questions to ask now. And then after the talk tonight, Sammi and Olivia will be signing in that little booth right where my coworker is pointing, but we'll remind you of that afterwards. And if you're joining us virtually, please buy a copy of the book in the link in your description. So we have just been so excited for this event at Books Are Magic, and it's so amazing getting to try these delicious cocktails tonight. I see you all have one. And I'm such a cocktail lover myself, so I'm so excited to learn more about these makers, shakers, and trailblazers tonight. Sammi Katz is a writer and bartender from New York City. She loves sharing her enthusiasm for all things cocktails and is always up for a lively debate with the appropriate garnish for a last word. She is the creator of the blog A Girl's Guide to Drinking Alone. Olivia McGiff is an artist living in Brooklyn. She designs book covers by day and illustrates drinks, dogs, and loved ones by night. Her illustration work has been featured in Lit Hub, Produce Parties, and Corriere della Sera's Cook. I don't think I pronounced that name right. Together, Sam and Olivia work as a writer-illustrator duo to make cocktails and spirits accessible and fun. Their joint work has appeared in the New York Times and the Daily Beast, and they are co-authors of Cocktails in Color, A Spirited Guide to the Art and Joy of Drink Making. And Amanda Schuster is a freelance lifestyle writer, editor, and beverage consultant based in Brooklyn, New York. An author, yeah. She's the author of Signature Cocktails, Drink Like a Local New York. Is that supposed to be New Yorker? I love if it's just local New York, but
Drink Like a Local New York, yeah.
I love that. And I was just like, is that a typo? And New York Cocktails. She has contributed to numerous publications, including Food and Wine, Savoir, Atlas Obscura, Inside Hook, Forbes, and Bloomberg, and was editor-in-chief of Alcohol Professor. She has still not found a transfer-free lipstick that can withstand a margarita salt room. All right, thank you all for coming. We'll get started.
Okay, hi. Everyone, thank you so much for being here, especially on this disgusting night. Really appreciate you forging ahead. We'll start by reading a little bit from the intro of Spirited Women. When I joined the team of a popular Manhattan cocktail bar in 2015, I was ecstatic. It was at the start of my bartending journey. I didn't know then that I would eventually dedicate my whole career to spirits and cocktails, but I was so excited to be welcomed into this elite group of cocktail bartenders. During my second shift, I learned that not only was I the lone female bartender on staff, but I was also the very first female bartender. The bar had already been open for 5 years. When I asked the male managers why this was the case, I got a variety of responses like, it just happened that way, or not a lot of qualified women applied, or it wasn't intentional, we just hired the best people for the job. Don't get me wrong, I loved working at that bar. Every one of my coworkers was amazing, and I consider my time there as foundational to my career. But yeah, I dealt with my fair share of sexism. I was once asked by a male guest why I wore a vest and tie like the guys instead of a skimpy black dress like the servers, all of whom were, of course, women. Just the fact that the uniform for bartenders was a vest and tie says it all. Me being behind that bar shaking up cocktails was a radical thing, even in 2015. But not that many decades earlier, there was Gossard v. Cleary, a 1948 Supreme Court ruling that upheld a Michigan law prohibiting women from tending bar unless her father or husband owned the establishment. Other similar laws popped up around the country, laws that banned women not only from tending bar, but from sitting at bars or even setting foot in them. This decision was overruled in 1976, but it was only 2 years prior that a woman could even open her own bar tab without a man's approval, when the ratification of the Equal Credit Opportunity Act meant a single woman could get a credit card in her own name. By that time, the Beatles had already broken up. There was already a second remake of A Star is Born. Man had walked on the moon, and woman couldn't open a freaking bar tab. Humans have been consuming alcohol basically since the dawn of time. Women have been drinking alcohol since it was invented, but they've also been making it and serving it since then too. There were women who brewed beer in the Middle Ages, women who ran dram shops throughout London's gin craze, female bootleggers who made a killing during Prohibition. Women have been involved in every part of the alcohol industry going back to ancient civilization. In fact, a woman named Maria Hebrea, also known as Mary the Jewess, invented the first piece of distilling technology all the way back in 100 CE. And yet, the world of spirits and alcohol is still thought of as masculine. Men drink serious liquor like whiskey, while women drink Cosmos. Men are bartenders, women are cocktail servers. There are real historical reasons as to why these stereotypes came to be, and some people still believe these worn-out cliches. The purpose of this book is to help debunk those entrenched misogynist ideas by celebrating women who have spent their careers shattering these outdated notions, women who have made delicious contributions to the drink space, women who pulled up a bar stool and made room for others to feel welcome. Olivia and I are cocktail people through and through. We love drinking cocktails, we love making cocktails, and we believe that cocktails are a vehicle for telling stories. Every woman in this book has a story worth sharing. This is not a history book, but rather a collection of profiles of modern-day women currently working in spirits, with each profile accompanied by an original cocktail recipe. The more stories we hear about women kicking ass in this industry, the more customary it will be to hear about female bar owners, bartenders, distillers, blenders, founders of liquor brands, CEOs of major alcohol companies. Hopefully soon we won't have to put the qualifier of woman or female before any job description. But in the grand scheme of things, it is still revolutionary to be a woman in spirits.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
I gotta do something to this.
No, you're good.
Oh, good? Okay. Well, thanks all for coming on a dark and stormy night. It's a terrible night to come out. But we're gonna make it work. So I wrote a blurb for the back of the book, and the beginning of it was cut off. And for clarity, probably for brevity, but one of the things I said was, in 2024, we are still not at a point when discussing the business of making beverages without bringing gender into the conversation. And like Sammi just said, I wish we could just say that someone is a bartender, distiller, brand manager, and not feel inclined to say that something is a women-owned brand, it's a female master distiller. But the thing is, it's still a male-dominated industry. And there are famous women from the spirits and cocktail industry who have been deservedly featured in the media time and again, but so many others are less known for their talent, hard work, and innovations while keeping their head down and getting stuff done. All right, so now my first question to both of you is, why this book now?
Great question. Well, Olivia and I, our first book is called Cocktails in Color, and it came out 2 years ago. And when we signed the deal with the publisher for that book, we actually signed a 2-book deal. We were very, very fortunate to get that. So when we were working on our first book, we knew that we always had another one coming down the pipe. So we really got to think about what we wanted to do. And when we were batting around ideas, we just kept coming back to this idea about women in spirits, given my experience working in the industry, exactly what you said of how it's still very male dominated. All of the women that I had met throughout my time were just so cool, and I was like, why just do other people not know about these amazing ladies? And so Olivia and I were like, you know what, let's feature some of these women who have not gotten some of the credit that they rightfully deserve, and shine a light on so many women throughout the world, throughout many job descriptions, who are doing amazing stuff and maybe have been in the shadows for a while. So wanted to celebrate their stories in this fun, colorful way.
I also think to your point, Amanda, it would be great if we could lose the woman bartender, woman distiller, all these things. But also, identity is important, and a lot of the women that we interviewed found a lot of power in that they were a woman in the industry. And so when we were interviewing, we never asked anyone, what does it feel like to be a woman in the industry? Because it's a fairly exhausting question to answer.
Boring.
I mean, yeah, but asking people, what kind of community have you found in this industry that really resonates with you? What are there women who you have, found space with, or found have lifted you up or that you want to lift up. And that's when people really started opening up, and like the list that we started developing of women in the industry who wanted to lift each other up was humongous. And so I think I agree that it would be great if we didn't have to preface all of these roles with women, but also I think these spaces are totally worth celebrating with women, you know, spirited women. And so giving ourselves the opportunity to dive into these spaces was really empowering for us as well, I think, and really exciting to hear stories of women in the industry who found that their identity was empowering them to make incredible spirits, to open really exciting bars and community spaces. So I'm really grateful to have worked on this book for 2 years, to see these, to meet these women and to be able to share their stories.
And you've done a beautiful job, both of you, really. I mean, telling the story and the illustrations, it's gorgeous, it's compelling, and yeah, there's a real narrative thread throughout it, and we'll get to that in a minute. But another question I wanted to ask you, this was a real collaborative process. It's not just that Sammi wrote the book and Olivia rendered the illustrations. They really worked together in real time. And so let's please talk about the process a little bit and how that works, because I think this is very different than when somebody is just writing a book for a publisher and they've assigned someone from the publishing company to design the rest of the book.
No, fully. I mean, we come as a package deal. Our agent is here, and we're kind of like, here we are together, an illustrator duo. So, you know, the way we work has always been us working collaboratively side by side. I mean, Olivia and I met in college doing student theater. There's really nothing more collaborative than that. And so doing this type of work was a way for us to continue working together, which is really what Cocktails and Color is about. And so this one also feels like a collaboration between all of these women, all, you know, multiply our collaboration by 55. But the way that we work is, yeah, we started developing the lists. I live and die by the Excel spreadsheet, so I had my master list of ladies, contact list, all that stuff. We decided who we wanted to reach out to. We would reach out to them, conduct the interviews, because Olivia also has a full-time job as a book designer at HarperCollins. There were some interviews that she could not be present for.
I watched the recording.
Yes. And then would take from their interview what we maybe wanted to think about what the cocktail was going to be. So usually it was connected to a product of some sort, and so we kept our weekly Sunday R&D rituals that we started with Cocktails and Color, and translated it to this book, where every Sunday Olivia would come over to my house. We would be like, okay, here's what we're going to tackle today. We would taste cocktails together, discuss the interviews, discuss what we loved about the woman, what the narrative might be.
Do like show and tell with each other of the type of work we had done throughout the week. So Sammi would maybe show some profiles she was working on. I would share some paintings that I was working on. So the text and the illustration were really developed in tandem with each other, which I think hopefully allows both of those things to like come together and tell the story together, and not feel like either the illustrations are just wedged in there or that the cocktails are wedged in next to a profile, that they're all kind of coming together to try to tell the story of these ladies.
Yeah. Thank you. Great question. Great answers.
So one of my favorite songs from the 80s is 88 Lines About 44 Women, and you came up with 45 cocktails for 55 women. Tell us a bit about how you came up with the recipes.
Sure. Really each recipe was inspired by our interviews with the women.
Very much driven by
their stories. Some of them came together really quickly, like the narrative was super clear. Others took some time because the large story. How do you distill a person's essence and career into a cocktail? It's ridiculous.
It's very impressive that you do that.
So yeah, I mean, being inspired by the product is certainly where we started. There were some brands that are featured in the book that we're already familiar with, like Bombay Sapphire, Doers. Some because we really were reaching to make it as global as possible, meaning we wanted to also highlight regional spirits, not just the kind of classic categories of vodka, gin, whiskey, rum. But that meant that sometimes I got a bottle from Nigeria of a palm wine spirit called Ogogoro, and I'd never tasted this thing before. And also I had one bottle of it because it's still not available in the US. So it was like, oh my God, how do I create a whole cocktail inspired by this woman who is reclaiming this Nigerian regional spirit when I have one bottle of it to play with?
And also
it's really good.
The product is really good too. So we like bring it to the bar that Sammi works at and want to share it with the bartenders because it's a really exciting product. But like give them the
Like
time
you
to
can
smell
smell it. But yeah, really being inspired by the woman, her kind of the focus of what the profile was going to be, or certain things that she emphasized that she loved. You know, we always edited the interviews being like, is there anything that you're allergic to or that you really hate? Because it really would be my worst nightmare if I had all of a sudden she's like, I'm allergic to walnuts. Like that would suck. So that was also a very helpful driver because some people were very clear in their interests. Like we made a cocktail for
the preferences.
Preferences, yeah. But yeah, so that was a helpful kind of navigator in some instances. Or for the products like Ogogoro, where I knew I wasn't going to be able to go crazy with trying all these different types of cocktails, I definitely leaned on Lola in that instance of like, what do you like to drink this with? What flavors do you like combining with this? How do you like to drink this? So yeah, each one was really different. Yeah.
Well, to that point, the book has a truly global perspective. And so how did you find, I mean, we live in a cocktail bubble, and, you know, going outside of the cosmopolitan and pun intended cities, where, you know, the cocktail industry is strong, how did you find out about some of the women, such as the one that you just described, you know, who live in the far reaches of the earth, but still, you know, work in the industry and make spirits and you know, have an influential base there?
Yeah, I mean, we really started with our own networks, also with kind of like a wish list of ladies that we would really be dying to talk to for a book like this, and kind of like what Olivia said earlier of we'd always ask, you know, who inspired you, like who's part of your community. So really our network kind of reached outward. And once we started building it, had the number set, we're going to do 45 profiles. It was really then kind of, I viewed it like building a cocktail menu where I wanted it to be as kind of diverse and like there'd be something for everybody. So we wanted to hit every continent, which we actually did besides Antarctica.
I'm gonna pass on that.
So kind of once it started filling out, it was like, okay, then what are we missing? And so really sometimes we just cold called, emailed people, and we got really lovely responses from women that, you know, I never would have heard of before, if not have been referred to by someone else. Be like, hi, I'm writing a book in the States. You're on an island in Japan. Would you please like talk to me? And some of that was crazy. Like, you know, we interviewed a master distiller in Australia, and she talked to me at 6 a.m. before her shift because of the time difference. Like such a champ.
But a lot of that searching also was a testament to the cocktail writing that is happening, because you know we learned about Lola Pedro, who makes Ogogoro in Nigeria, through a Punch article.
Yeah.
And so there is so much writing that is going on, highlighting women and highlighting regional spirits and people who are doing really exciting things in the industry. But for us, it was also exciting to bring all of those stories together as well, to pair them with cocktails and to give a more kind of global survey of what it can look like to be a woman in the industry around the world, you know, many different job types, many different types of spirits.
And so, to the point of making things look like something, you illustrated this entire book. And most cocktail books are use photographs instead of illustrations.
Very beautiful photographs.
Yes. But what are the challenges besides actually having to render them of illustrating a book such as this one?
Portraits are so scary. I knew that when we started the project that we wanted to represent everyone visually. And I was very scared of doing the portraits for 55 women who, after doing all these interviews, was so impressed by and wanted to, do right by them. So I think that was probably the most daunting part, was just getting over my own fear of like rendering a face and someone, in their prime, like doing what they love. Once I jumped over that hurdle, the fun part was, it actually is delightful to be able to know, okay, I have 130 paintings to do. And just work through, if I got tired of doing portraits, I could always pivot over to cocktail paintings. But each one of those styles of illustration were still about storytelling and identity, and also about color and joy. So there wasn't really any part of the book that I disliked working on or illustrating. Every part of it, I got to think back on the illustration, on the profile that, we were trying to tell about the cocktail that we had tried earlier that week. But I think definitely just the sheer scale of it all was definitely intimidating at the beginning.
So you knew the layout ahead of time. You knew that you had a number that you had to hit aside from the 55 portraits.
I knew that we wanted to show every cocktail and show every woman. So we didn't want to have a page that the cocktail was never shown. I'm a visual person. I want to be able to see the drink and know, like, I want to make that. That looks delicious. Or like really revel in what like the glassware is. Like figuring out what type of coupe and what the shape of it is that would really pair well with the woman and her story and her spirit. And I think the only unknown part was how many spot illustrations there were going to be throughout the book. But because Sammi and I worked in tandem, I could kind of on the slide be like, could you cut 50 words from this profile so that I could fit an illustration in there?
Yes, chef.
Or like, you know what, make that one longer because I
got
nothing. So, for projects that are a little bit more traditional, where you have exactly your assignment of, what you need to illustrate and how big they should be and, how many there are, we got to form that together a bit more organically.
It's amazing how this conversation just seems to be flowing into the next question so organically. So my next question is actually about cocktail writing and about the challenges of cocktail writing. Everybody thinks, oh, it's drinking, it's fun, it's so easy. It's actually really hard to write about cocktails because you have to explain how something is made when sometimes it's just like, okay, I'm just making this. But there are specific instructions. So as a bartender, and writing about cocktails, what did you have in mind? And what do you think about when you're writing about cocktails and giving instructions that are maybe different than when somebody like me is writing about cocktails?
Yeah, I really try to approach it from a place of non-judgment. So like, assuming that I don't know everything, trying to relay it in words that maybe someone who doesn't work behind a bar can understand, and make it sound, I want to describe it like it's going to be fun to drink, kind of like how you want to paint them, like, oh, I want to drink that, like, read the description and you want to drink that. So how do you describe something in like a tantalizing way, and taking apart the drink and talking about its components and how they fit together is kind of how I work in creating cocktails anyway. It's like, okay, well, how do flowers go with mezcal and smoke, and what's the bridge between that? Oh, it's grapefruit. So kind of breaking it down in that way. But with this book, it was challenge also writing profiles similarly to Olivia. I was like, dear God, I'm writing about live people that I actually respect and love. Like, oh my God, like before it's like a martini doesn't care what you say about it. But I want them to like it. So it was a challenge in both ways, but similarly to Olivia, it's like when I got kind of like exhausted or okay, I'm done with profiles for a while, I could go to then the recipe head notes and focus on that. Like, okay, if I have this drink, how do I describe this drink, and how does that relate to the woman's story? So,
And what about the instructions?
the instructions really have to be kind of
You want to like invite the person in and make sure that they're not intimidated by the instructions for the cocktail. I remember there were a couple drinks that we were working on that we wanted to have the glass be smoked because
So hard to
because Victoria Edie Butler, who is
she's the master blender of Uncle Nearest whiskey
and she
Tennessee.
when we asked her about her like food preferences and how she likes to enjoy her whiskey, she likes to drink it neat.
She was so cool. I
Yeah.
love her. She's a badass. But she drinks everything at barrel proof when she tastes. It's insane. But yeah, no. I was like, what do you like to drink? And she's like, I like cinnamon. I like pineapple. I like taking my Uncle Nearest neat, sitting by a fire with a cigar. I was like,
Wow.
great. Thank you. I was like, that's the cocktail. So I was like, okay, well, I know I want a smoking cinnamon stick to reference her cigar, and like, how do we get like campfire vibes in this somehow? So really, yeah, I brought back a smoker to one of our R&D sessions, and Olivia was like, absolutely not. We have
The way to do this because the drinks are all, I'm a little biased, but they're all really good. And you want to figure out how to, if someone's buying the book, and as a cocktail book, you want to make sure that they feel empowered to actually try these cocktails as a home bartender. And so both R&Ding the process of how are we making this, and then how are we writing it so that someone is, we can't tell someone to buy a smoker for a cocktail book like this, which is really about profiling these women and celebrating them, and not really getting into like the nitty gritty like nerddom of cocktails, like buy the smoker, buy the all that stuff.
Right. Yeah, unless like, there are some profiles in this book in the shakers section that are featured bartenders, bar owners. So if a woman was a cocktail creator in her own right, it was like, please contribute it, because it wouldn't make any sense for me to create a drink for you. And there's one case where we have Kelsey Ramage, who is about fully sustainable, no waste at all, and her drink is the most complicated in the book. It's actually making your own peach wine. And I was like, I have to make my own peach wine. I was like, oh no, I gotta get the stuff and do this. But it's like, but that's her whole style, is using the entire fruit in multiple ways. So it makes sense for her. But yes, for a book like this, we can't have every recipe feel like, oh, I gotta do that.
But it was really fun, I have to say, to get updates from Sammi throughout the couple weeks where she was making that peach wine. I'm like, here's what it looks like today. Here's what it looks like today. And
a little gremlin on the kitchen counter.
You gotta go to an orchard first.
Yes, exactly.
That would
be really
like
sustainable. Yeah.
Yeah, just get your own chicken. Move along. Anyway, so okay, so what did you learn about the industry in the process of writing this book?
I mean, so many things. I don't think I'd ever really taken time before starting this book to like sit down and talk to a distiller and be like, okay, so what's your job? And like, the master distiller of Bombay Sapphire, I'm like, what do you actually do? Like actually thinking about it day to day, what do you do? And she's like, control the production of Bombay Sapphire. It's like, yes, but details. So I'd never ever gotten into like the real nitty gritty with some of like the technical aspects of it, which is so cool. And also learning like the why people wanted to be a blender as opposed to a distiller. Why did you want to start a company as opposed to getting involved with a company? Like, it really kind of highlighted all of the different aspects and like all of the different ways that you can be a part of the industry in a very cool, enlightening way.
I think we also got to learn a lot more about regional spirits through this process because we wanted to make the project global. And when we were trying to, towards the end of the process, fill the gaps of like, okay, we don't have anyone from the Middle East. Like, how can we find a woman in the industry who's working in spirits. Okay, maybe we have to start looking at the regional spirits of that area. Let's start looking at Iraq, and which is a regional spirit in Lebanon, and like, can we find a woman who's working in Iraq specifically?
And we did, we found her.
Yeah, she's like so cool. But I think the nature of the project allowed us to get into crevices in the industry that we wouldn't have normally sought out, which was really exciting, and also so exciting to just get to learn about a lot of new spirits, and that they're all still totally, like, it's fun to play with them in cocktailing and figure out how that ingredient can tell this woman's story, what it plays with. It was exciting to not just learn about people that we didn't know, but about the spirits that we didn't know.
Yeah, I
about
piqued my
beforehand.
interest immensely in regional spirits around, like, now everywhere I travel, I'm like, okay, what do you distill here? Like, I'm now like kind of looking at the world in that way, and I wasn't before.
So, okay, it's 55 women who work in the industry. They work with spirits, they make cocktails. What other common threads did you find?
We ended up talking to a lot of women who had taken over their families' companies. That was kind of a common thread. Several women took over like from the patriarch in the family, which was very cool to see. So that was something that kind of kept coming up.
And I think with that, those women who were taking over a family company, so much of their pride in their spirit and in what they were doing was about upholding the tradition of both their family and also like what is this spirit, but also figuring out how to bring it into this century, how to bring it into like a more maybe a more casual way of drinking it, so it's not, you know, I'm thinking of
Selena, yeah.
Selena, of
Cellophane Sochu
Yeah.
on the island of Japan.
and that product, the sochu, had always been imbibed with a much more kind of traditional ethos, and she wanted to bring it into a more casual, like friendly setting. And so her specific bottling that we feature in the book is a much more casual kind of iteration of the spirit. And so I think it was exciting to see this through line of women upholding tradition and really honoring like where these traditions have come from, and also trying to figure out how to put their own spin on it and bring it into a more kind of current context.
Okay, I think we're almost at the Q&A part, but is there anything else that you would like people to know about your beautiful book?
I think,
It was a joy to make.
yeah,
Like through all the struggles that a book is in terms of the work and the hardship and the back and forth of it all, like truly this was such a pleasure to work on, not only with Olivia but also to know that we then get to share all of these stories at the end of it.
Yeah.
So being able to be like, oh my god, other people now get to like learn about Selena making shochu on the Amami Islands in Japan. Like it's fascinating, and I'm so excited to be able to like share that now with other people after being like in it for so long. But yeah, it was just like so lovely, and every woman was so wonderful to talk to and has her own unique story, and it was it was beautiful. Yeah.
yeah, everyone's very generous in the process, and we're, I think, just really grateful to the women who shared their stories with us, and also you know, starting to do a bit of a book tour and talking to people, remembering how current some of these issues of gender are in these spaces still, and how, you know, hearing these stories of success is really meaningful for not just women in the industry, just anyone in the industry. So I'm really excited to just keep sharing it.
Okay, I think we can take some questions for the audience. Anybody have one?
Sorry, for both of y'all on both like the art and copy side, how did you avoid resorting to formula, knowing that you had 55 profiles, 100 plus paintings, and you got a new blank page every day? it would be tempting, I would assume, to kind of start with the same
For
structure.
sure. I've talked to my therapist a lot about this.
Just to reiterate for our lovely friends on YouTube, the question is how did we avoid falling into formula and just reiterating the same kind of structure for cocktails and portraits and paintings.
Thanks, Olivia. Exactly what you said. I structured it myself. I had a whiteboard calendar where I wrote a woman's name on every day, and I was like, okay, I'm starting that book today. Like, I really viewed it as like, okay, I'm starting a new book about this woman. And then afterward, having to edit it to make sure that the narrative flowed together. But really viewing it as like, okay, this is her own story. I'm taking it from what she gave me, what we're gonna highlight. So I used formula in terms of my structure, but in the writing kind of followed where the story took me in that sense.
And I think for both the profile writing and the illustration, there was so much source material for each profile. Like, we had the interview that we did with each woman, we had the research that we did about the products and the women on our own. I had like mood boards for every single cocktail, which was both the photo that I had taken of the cocktail, images, like reference images of every single ingredient and raw ingredient that are in the cocktail.
Yeah, the product itself too, so
The
there were
product
plenty of
itself.
times like sitting just with the bottle and tasting it little by little to see what nuances came out of it too.
Yeah, I think starting each new painting or each new profile and remembering like, okay, there's so much reference material about this one woman, about this one cocktail. So I didn't find myself falling into formula too much because there was just so much like new material to consider for each profile. But I think when I started doing layout for the book and started realizing what profile is gonna go next to each profile, like the horizon line on every single one of the cocktail paintings, realizing like, okay, I need to start varying where this horizon line is lining up, because you're turning the pages and you don't want them to line up all in the same. You want there to be like some movement from page to page. So I think we can do all of the planning as we're working on each thing, but then once you start bringing it together and you start seeing, doing the self-editing of seeing like, oh, you know what, actually we have 2 gin drinks next to each other, maybe we should, because both of these profiles are talking about the botanicals and how interesting the botanicals are that they're bringing into these gins. So maybe we need to place these profiles a little bit farther apart, not because they're repetitive, but just you want each one to be able to stand on its own.
Yeah, it definitely felt like Steve Kornacki at some points of like organizing the board, put that next to that, and let's talk about that too, that's too similar, so really it was like a puzzle piece that we had to figure out together.
Yeah.
So we also didn't, the profiles aren't all the same length. We didn't limit ourselves to like, okay, well each one is 800 words. Like, we really wanted to give some that felt like they needed a little bit more air, a little bit more explanation. Going back to the Ogogoro, it's like, I had to get me to like the British occupation of Nigeria. Oh my God, like I need 5 pages for this. I can't do that in 3.
Yeah.
So that also gave us some variance in structure. Thanks for the question.
How long did this project take for you? When did you come up with the idea? Do you remember the moment that you could share with us? And then
The question is, how long did it take? And
Yeah, I think from like inception to right now, almost 3 years, I want to say. We did our first.
I'm looking at our age right now.
let's look now.
Yeah, we did our very first interview, which means that we'd already pitched the idea, gotten a list together, done all that stuff in September 2022. And did the last one in like August 2023, maybe. And then finished up with all of the cocktails by like the beginning of 2024.
If there had been more time, it would have been cool. But I think having to do it just because of the nature of the schedule in a condensed timeline allowed us to really like hone in and focus in. But there were some like white knuckle moments.
Yeah, we were both like sprinting to the finish line at certain points. you know, we do everything in tandem, but our deadlines were different. It's like manuscript is due at this time, illustrators are due at this time. So there were points when Olivia had to be my coach and be like, you can do this, you got this.
Yeah.
And then, you know, a month later I'd be like, you got this, paint away.
Sammy had submitted the manuscript and she was like, let's go for a celebratory dinner. I was like, I am in painting, Bill. I cannot talk to you right now. I'm so sorry. But having a partner in crime to like,
Yes.
you know, cheer each other on definitely helped.
Anyone else? Hi. Did anything especially surprise you as you were speaking to all the women?
The question is, did anything surprise you as you were interviewing the women?
I mean, so much, certainly because there were, you know, as we've discussed, like regions and people that I didn't know anything about. So I went into some of these truly with totally open eyes. I think, yeah, I mean, I guess I already said this, but when I spoke with Victoria E. Butler for Our Uncle Nearest, you know, she was also like a fifth generation. Her story's incredible. But yeah, the fact that she tastes everything at barrel proof is insane.
What does that mean?
That means no water is added at all. It means she like opens the cask and sips it, and that's how she blends her whiskey. Like that, nobody does that. Like that is insane. This woman is like in her 50s, was not a whiskey drinker before she took over. It's a family generation thing, so she's like, it's in my blood. I can do this, and I'm like, you don't, what? How do you? And she's like, that's how it tastes. I want to taste it as it is, and that's how she blends it. That was extraordinary. There are plenty of little things in each interview that we found surprising. I don't know if you have one that you remember.
I think I really loved learning about the women, especially who it had been in their family, that this was a family tradition, and like growing up knowing that you wanted to work in whiskey is like a fascinating perspective. That
What's that
you know,
kindergarten class like?
to then approach the industry as like, okay, where is my space? Like, where can my creativity sing? I think I learned so much about what is the creative thing about a distiller or about a blender or about, you know, what is Andrea's role? The name?
She's the master of maturation.
Yeah, which
for
is like
Michter's whiskey,
it's,
which
you know,
means her
yeah.
job is wood.
Yeah.
She uses the wood for the bear. And talking to her about that was actually very surprising. I did not know as much about oak. And just to see her like, eyes light up, being like, there are all these species of oak, and you can use, you know, there are regulations for which oaks you can use for what whiskey, but like, just her like sheer joy at the fact that she gets to like work with oak and whiskey for a living was like the coolest thing to see.
Hi friends. I'm curious, I know obviously this is your second book together, which is amazing, and you've spoken a bit about kind of the demands of the material, like, you know, portraying live people, but I'm curious, beyond that, like, how did your process either individually or collaboratively evolve from book 1 to book 2?
So the question is for the YouTube audience and for everybody else. How did your process evolve from book 1 to book 2?
I mean, book 1 was, Cocktails and Color was really, the collaboration was me and Sammi. We got to just, like, that whole book is also handwritten and every page is illustrated. It's much more kind of, like, hand-honed and about, like, our partnership. And so this project, just the nature of it, it had to be so much bigger and more organized. And so I think figuring out how to grow our collaboration and our process from just, you know, the room that we're in and what we want to be working on, to how do we both reach out and reach all of these people, organize like the communication, how do we, you know, figure out how to find joy in all of that still, and figure out how to make all of that organization still feel like, what is the point? We're telling these women's stories, we are like collaborating with them and with each other. I think I learned a lot about how to find joy and creativity in these more kind of like administrative tasks, because
sure.
they were necessary and we couldn't get bogged down by them. So figuring out how to do that was, I think, a good skill to like try to wrestle to the ground.
Absolutely, and like a Herculean effort, to be honest, because our list ended up being, we didn't not contact this many people, but our list at the end ended up being like 200 names long.
Wow.
Like, we really were like, okay, how do we narrow this down, which is great, it's an embarrassment of riches.
Yeah.
But that was the administrative tasks we did not have with Cocktails in Color. I think we also spent a lot more time doing our solo work for this one, because we essentially gave each ourselves double the work from Cocktails in Color.
Yeah.
Like, it was like, oh yeah, make cocktails and also write profiles. And Olivia's like, oh yeah, paint cocktails and also paint people. Like, it was just a lot more of us with our heads down, and then we'd come together and share the work, as opposed to Cocktails in Color. We were a little bit more right side by side,
Yeah.
just by the nature of it.
What made you particularly passionate about like the cocktails itself? Like, it seems like it's been like a driver for you, right? Like, you started by working in the industry and wanting to, you know, not just be a bartender, but a cocktail maker. And so what kind of like drove you guys both towards that? And do you see it like as a bond, like in society and your friendship, or like what really like drives that enough to make 2 books about it? And yeah.
So to sort of distill that question, why
I'm
2
sorry.
books got you right there. Why 2 books about cocktails specifically?
I mean, besides the fact that we love drinking them, we both really believe that cocktails are a perfect vehicle for storytelling. Like, you can really share so much in a cocktail, kind of like a chef with a dish of like, what does each ingredient represent? You're working on such a small scale that each component of it really has to matter and be in alignment with all the other components, which I think is just a really cool, beautiful thing. And yeah, I mean, we'd had some practice already, kind of translating other media into cocktails. We have been working with Tables of Contents, which is an amazing dinner literary series that highlights readings monthly, and they make dishes based on each reading. And so we came on as the beverage crew and make cocktails based on each reading. So taking a novel and being like, okay, what do I want to take from this and make it to a cocktail is pretty similar to taking a woman's career and being like, okay, what do I want to do with this?
Components.
Yeah. What story do I
Become
want
an
to tell?
ingredient.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also think that cocktails, the fact that we're on either end of the bar, like as Sammi professionally is behind the bar, and I, not professionally, but joyfully
Yes.
I'm on the other end of the bar. I think allows us to have different perspectives on cocktails, but like kind of meet in the middle and figure out like, okay, what is the real kind of professional, like what is the knowledge of each of these ingredients, and then what is maybe the more like layman perspective of all of these, or like just how does it taste, and how can we from different backgrounds figure out how to tell these stories in a way that we can both share knowledge but also just make it feel like joyful and accessible, because at the end of the day that's how we both feel about cocktails. Is like they're joyful, you gather like with friends and loved ones to celebrate something, and being able to do that with each other is, and then share it is, I think, really special, and I'm grateful that we got to do it for 2 days.
Sorry. This sort of goes off of the last question. So, in the name of storytelling, and this might be a little bit more for Olivia, but I'm obsessed with color in the book. I was just flipping through. There's so many fun colors, and how do you actually like capture both a drink and a profile with colors? And I was just curious about sort of your process around that.
How do you capture both a drink and a profile with colors?
I love color too. I think I work mainly with paint with gouache, which is like a really creamy kind of watercolor style paint. And so that paint type alone just lends itself to like really creamy, bright kind of poppy colors. And then there's plenty of illustrations throughout the book that are digital as well, but I think my color sensibility mainly comes from like paint pigment. And then for the book, oftentimes it came from like, okay, what are the ingredients? It was mainly driven by the cocktail, like because layout wise, those are the biggest visual things throughout the book. So what is the color of the cocktail? What is the color of the bottle? What are the color of the ingredients? How do all of those come together? Is the glassware stemware? Because if so, we're going to see a lot more of the background. And so figuring out, you know, how to have all of those things come together cohesively, but also how can that color story share like the energy that woman has and what her story is. For some of them that were much more there was some profiles, some interviews that we did for the book where as soon as we got onto the Zoom call, a lot of them were on Zoom, and started talking to the woman, like both of our heart rates kind of like mellowed out because she was just so serene and lovely. And so those paintings are much more kind of trying to evoke some type of serenity. And then for some profiles that were just like, wow, that was quite an hour of conversation. Like, what a story. Those paintings and profiles are much more kind of like poppy and bright in color. But yeah, I think a lot of it came from the cocktail portrait, but it's all kind of driven by like what is the energy that woman is bringing in her story.
We have time for one more. Anyone?
You mentioned earlier how you went right from cocktails and color to creating Spirited Women. Your collaboration is so beautiful with these Sunday R&D sessions. I love. What are you gonna do with that Sunday R&D time moving forward after your very fun book tour that you have ahead of you?
I mean, how will you fill your Sundays?
You don't have to do R&D anymore. Well, luckily, Sammi and I still work together on the cocktail program for the Tables of Contents reading series, which is a monthly reading series in Brooklyn. Come on by, it's a good time.
Having one on Tuesday.
So, and that's 3 cocktails a month that are inspired by 3 new books each month. And so we still have, luckily, something that we can gather around and like compare notes of like, okay, this book was really sad, but there's a lot of, you know, whiskey and there's a lot of like these ingredients and how do we bring all of these elements together to like one piece of cocktail.
So we'll still be doing it just in a different context. But you did make a great point of like, right, I forgot that we were also doing that while doing the cocktails for this book. So I think like I created like something like 75 cocktails last year.
Yes, really.
How did I do that? I can't think about it. But
We will like sleep in a little bit more on Sundays.
We also, you know, after our Sunday work day, because there's only a certain amount of time that you can just taste before your palate gets wiped out, that we've been like, you know, let's go for some cheese curds at Long Island Bar. So that ritual. Before we wrap up, I do just want to call out the yummy cocktail that you've been drinking tonight is in the book. It's with Kasama rum, and the founder actually is here. So I'm just telling Alexandra Gorda, made this beautiful rum. Okay, thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting this event.
And thank you, Books Are Magic, for having us.
Yeah.
And for existing.
Can I just grab this really quick?
Hello everyone, just really quickly. I'm sorry, but I do want to
Well, anyway, we're gonna do the signing line here just because we're gonna have cocktails still over there, and then there's still books to purchase if you would like one if you're on live stream. There's also books to purchase in the link. Yay, thank you.
Or beverages. Okay, I need a beverage.